Welcome back. I asked earlier that, it's part of our identity, part of our commitments, part of our responsibilities and so on, is to ask that question, who's missing? Who's missing from our radar? Another way of putting it is, who are the winners and the losers in our world? I'd just like to invite you, just if you want to, the next person next to you, just for a few minutes, to maybe come up with a list of people, or just name a few groups of people that might be considered those who are often missing, or those not on the radar in our church or school, or community or society. Just talk to the person next to you for a minute or two. Okay. Who would like to sort of share with us, so what you might just discuss with each other?
We're just laughing.
Laughing?
Oh, yeah, because every time we start to have a discussion, the presenter says, okay, it's time up now, and we never exchange.
You what?
We never have the opportunity to exchange.
Oh, okay. You want,
In other words, just done all the talking.
Just been coincidental.
did you do all the talking?
That's it, yeah.
Each time, so it's been coincidental, that's all.
Next time she goes first.
Oh, yeah, plenty of time to talk otherwise.
Who missed out? Who was the loser here?
Oh, I missed out.
Oh, sorry.
It's quite all right. I have plenty of time by the time.
Okay. You get to get it back later.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Anyone just want to share just a few, just briefly what we...
Yeah, we chatted just for everyone said women
Yep.
are left out. Gay and lesbian people left out. We get much further. There's a lot of other people.
Other people might have something. Yes.
I was thinking of a more specific example. At our school we have numbers of Sudanese refugee students, and oftentimes the boys are quite good soccer players, so they'll get into a team, and the teams might practice at 6 in the morning or 6:30, and the teacher coach will say, well, if you're not going to come to training, you can't be in the team. What they haven't understood is that the child has no car to get there. So there's unless somebody else hears about that and makes
Makes it
build
possible.
a consciousness among staff that this is a different circumstance, they get left out.
It's very local. It's a very local response. Thank you. Any others?
Yeah, we're just looking at the different groups. We've got some boarders that come in to our school from, say, Melbourne, who bypass a lot of other schools, but they're actually accepted by the local community. They've made really nice networks of friends in most cases. So they're the winners and the losers are sometimes the kids that have problems that are really hard to fix, or they don't fit into a particular mould. And sometimes they leave frustrated and they can't help anyone else.
Probably, I was thinking mentally, like mental health is becoming a lot more of an issue, not just for kids and staff, to other colleagues. And just thinking about, it's such an unknown area, and it's so easy to belittle people who might seem a bit, oh, they're just
you're talking about mentally ill people too, they sort of touch into other groups, don't they? Into homelessness, into people in prison. There's a disproportionate number of people who live with mental illness in prison, which have become in Australia de facto mental asylums, if you like. Just in boarding houses and all those sorts of places.
I always found it pretty horrific. I don't know what the situation is.
Sorry?
I don't know the situations in other states, but in Queensland, mental health folk who were in prison only ever got a 3-week supply of medication as they were leaving prison, and often would take longer for their centrelink and everything to kick into place, and so they would run out of medications and become really unwell right at that critical time when they needed more services. So it was just something that used to have come across before.
You mentioned prisons. I think it's one of those groups of people that a lot of people don't have much sympathy for. I work with the Community Justice Coalition, which is looking at some prison reform. A great number of people, crime seems to be going down in our society, but the number of people going to prison is going up and up and up. And one group is in juvenile justice. The young, like at the moment, I think there's something on the radio this morning. 20 Aboriginal people were 28, or youth were 28 times more likely to end up in prison than non-Aboriginal. That was up to 2 years ago. Things are improved a lot. It's only 24 times now. like it's just, they were just gloating and saying, oh, well, it's gone down, but things are improving from 28 times to 24 times. But, in juvenile justice, there's oftentimes they're Indigenous, also have mental illness, also they're young, and they're black. So, it just captures a whole lot of people in our community. And there are a lot of people that under normal circumstances in prison who would not be there, who didn't have a mental illness, or if they weren't poor, or if they weren't Aboriginal. Any others? We have people who are trafficked, in Australia. There's another group that I belong to, there's Australian Catholic Religious Against Trafficking in Humans. People don't realise that people are actually trafficked into this country, And there's more slaves around the world now, in the world now, than when William Wilberforce, worked to end slavery. So there's different forms of trafficking. They're not necessarily in chains like they were, what we see in movies in America, but people are still in some kind of bondage around the world, and also in this country. People who are homeless, who are, unemployment, and lots of different groups. And they, sometimes just one bad decision can end up with a person being homeless or two. So, thank you. Any other? Ken, did you have something? Sorry, Ken.
As you know, I resigned from Amnesty International 6 years after they came out more or less in favour of abortion. Now, my conscience is not happy about having done that. I would like your comment on the matter, please.
On your conscience or on your decision? I think I understand what you're saying, Ken. Look, I remember you writing about saying that you had left Amnesty, and and I know that you've been on that principle about abortion for a long time, and I think it's a very important one. Because there are another children that are in that situation, or aborted children are also one of those that are missing in a sense. But there's other issues involved as well. There's women's rights and how women are treated and how they've been in society and so on, that sometimes leads them to have an abortion, which we can't always appreciate, especially as men. But the other thing is, I don't agree with what, with abortion as such, but I don't think Amnesty was giving a blanket approval of abortion, but sort of in some rights, or in some areas, in some circumstances. I think that's what they were allowing. But again, I'm not exactly sure of the whole circumstance, but it wasn't, open slate up or anything like that. But I couldn't leave Amnesty, and I've stayed with Amnesty because if I left Amnesty, it'd be also leaving an organisation that speaks out on and supports many other people around our world who are being violated and oppressed for their political beliefs.
Yeah, well,
and that's a great concern to me.
yeah, thank you. But also, it's okay to ignore what the church said, although the church didn't make it sort of an infallible thing, did it? I could safely ignore what the church has reputed to us.
Oh, look, it doesn't, see, Amnesty is not a church organisation. Amnesty is not, does not have to, obey church teaching. We do as Catholics or as Christians. But the thing is, that by remaining with Amnesty, it does not mean that I am going against church teaching. Because I'm positively saying that there are other things that Amnesty is doing is worthwhile and good. I don't have to agree with everything. If I don't agree with everything my country does, but I'm going to let go of my citizenship. There's lots of things I don't agree with. You understand? It doesn't answer your question necessarily, but we applaud your standing on your conscience.
Yeah.
And maybe you might even decide, well, okay, I can hang on to this belief and this, and still then go back to Amnesty and work for the other issues that are very important.
I thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else want to say anything? You might not answer appropriately. Go.
Just made the comment, and I said it in our discussion. Sometimes the people who are not so much missing from the radar but get wiped off the radar are the people who are prepared to speak out. People like yourself, and we mentioned Joe Chittister, Richard Law, and various others. They come to mind because they're world renowned. But even people within our communities, when they speak out against injustice, they also can suffer injustice.
Dissenters and whistleblowers and those sorts of
Yes.
people. Yes. And look at this big, large group of 58,000 women in the United Catholic women in the United States at the moment.
That's right.
And they're being vilified by the official church for actually living the gospel. They've been there. These are women in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and maybe even beyond, who have been, suffering in the heat of the sun, to be with women who are marginalised, to be with the poor, and to be with, all kinds of people in dire straits. Dangerous women, very dangerous. Okay, so we're urged by the church to contribute to and to participate in a public conversation about building right relationships, building peace and justice in our societies and our communities. And one of the things that we often have to deal with is, even in my sort of work, is the accusation that we need to keep out of politics. Religion cannot ever be a private affair, and it certainly wasn't for Jesus. I've often said in various groups that Jesus was through and through political. It's not about parties, but it's about changing this world in which we live in. Jesus didn't say too much about going to heaven, talking about the needs of our sisters and brothers. We can't submit to the call for religion to stay out of politics. To accept that religion is a private affair, and there's no place in the public forum, goes against the gospel. John Paul II even said we must reject the temptation to offer a privatised and individualist spirituality, which ill accords with the demands of charity. He called us to the task of shaping history, a commitment energised by prayer and by worship. And I think this is where the spiritual of the heart, without blowing the trumpet too much, is moving away from what we used to call devotion to the Sacred Heart, which tended to be, I don't think it was the Father Chevalier necessarily, but tended to become a very privatised individualist affair. And the spirituality of the heart is reminding us that we have to be people of the heart, and to be of the heart means to be reaching out, to be touching, to be engaging with others. So the work of social transformation isn't an optional extra. It originates, as I believe, from God's own heart, God's own passion for the marginalised and the suffering. And we see that through and through in the prophets, as well as in the life of Jesus. We see it in the life of the saints, canonised and non-canonised. It's a sharing, and our action and our engagement is a sharing in God's passion for humanity. And sometimes this passion seems, sadly, to be more evident outside the circles in which we would expect to find it. In the work that, in the kind of work that I've been involved in for over these last years, I've rubbed shoulders with people who have no faith, or non-Christian, or non-Catholic, who sometimes exhibited more concern for humanity than their sisters and brothers than those that we would expect. I've already mentioned Stephen Lewis, who has that dream of an AIDS-free world. Politician, former politician and diplomat and Deputy Executive Director of UNICEF and the UN Special Envoy, all those things has kept him, even though he's retired now, has kept him in that line of work. The Guatemalan bishop said to some of our colleagues from the Edmund Rice Centre a few years ago, when they were visiting Guatemala and visiting places where there have been massacres of people, of indigenous people and so on, and he said, when you feel enraged and angry and passionate deep in your guts, don't try to push it down or push it out. He says, leave it, because that is the passion of God speaking through you. It goes back to what I was saying earlier about the rage and the anger that Stephen Lewis spoke about this morning on the radio, and also which I heard coming through in his talks some years ago on the, it's the passion of God. People giving a damn about humanity because God does, and the prophets did. We can think of people who seem to be prophetic in our own world. We mentioned Joan Chittister. Someone mentioned Joan Chittister. We might mention even people like Michael Kirby. We could mention people like Philip Adams even. There's a God-intoxicated atheist who always seems to be talking about spirituality. He reckons he's an atheist. Those sorts of people somehow can touch others and bring people in, and also reveal something of the humanity of God. And so our engagement is a sharing in God's passion for humanity. As Catholic social teaching provides a value-added dimension to justice work and public policy, so too I believe that the spirituality of the heart provides a value-added dimension to our activity and our living. We have the gospel, we have the wisdom of Catholic social teaching, which some say is our best kept secret, and we also have the spirituality of the heart, and also all the other spiritualities as well. They add to our activity and to our living. So what does this bring to the key social challenges that we face? What are they? What does our faith contribute to understanding and responding to these issues? What do we bring to these issues in terms of our understanding, evaluation and response? You know, we've got these issues we're facing at the moment with care for the environment, the invasion of Afghanistan and the ongoing involvement in Iraq, the threats against Pakistan and Yemen, care of people living with mental illness in our community, Aboriginal health and education and employment, the justice system, industrial relations changes that somehow keep battering the poor and the employed. We look at the ongoing issue of genocide in West Papua, a country or province so close to us, yet far from our hearts. And yet, you know, we have been responsible as a nation for their ongoing oppression. We've mentioned women in our community, in our society, and especially, sadly, in our church. The ordination of women. I'm not allowed to talk about that. I always sort of justify it by saying, I'm not allowed to talk about this stuff. The stifling of dissent. Media ownership stifles dissent as well. So all those are sorts of issues. And what the question for us to reflect on in our own time is, how do we evaluate that? What does our faith say to those sorts of issues? The care of the environment and what other ones I just mentioned. Father Peter Henriot is an English Jesuit social analyst, says that, you know, for many people the question is where I sit, or sorry, where I stand on an issue depends on where I sit. And I heard that the other day from Tim Costello on the radio as well. He was talking about, you know, where I stand depends on where I sit. So I think there's a further point to go, further, you know, another step to go. Where I stand on an issue doesn't just depend on where I sit, but also who I sit with. It's the person that I choose to connect with. The person I choose maybe to work in partnership with. Not to do things for them necessarily, but to be with them in partnership, so they too can be their own agents of change. The prophets and Jesus insisted that worship and prayer that ignores the oppressed and disadvantaged is a sham in God's eyes. I've already indicated that before. And Jesus was uncompromising. If we do nothing to feed the hungry or clothe the naked, we can have no place with God. Our place with God is always linked to our commitment to the well-being of suffering, sick and disadvantaged people. It's a work of social transformation. And it's always a bottom-up thing. It's got to begin from the bottom, with the people who are affected. Experts say that we have the resources and expertise to eliminate hunger entirely from our planet and eradicate the worst forms of poverty within decades. But have we got the will? Stephen Lewis, again, says that we can also reduce AIDS and eliminate AIDS, but we don't. And these are just two examples of what we can do as a common humanity, but we don't. So we have a serious moral obligation, but there's a silence in our world. It means, and we could ask ourselves, is this silence an acquiescence? Silence means maybe walking past a situation in our street or ignoring it. Ignoring or avoiding being involved when you see the police bashing a bloke on the footpath in my local area. And finding that man has been charged with assaulting police. He could have been in jail unless someone speaks up for him in court. Fortunately, this bloke got off, but I wonder how many more people are in jail for those sorts of things. It's especially for Indigenous or Arabic or a different ethnic group. Silence means sometimes walking past our canteen or office or neighbourhood, or ignoring racist jokes or sexist jokes and those sorts of things that put people down. On a grander scale, silence is acquiescence in the needless deaths of millions of people and the huge toll of human suffering. But we need to ask ourselves, what is it that prevents us from engaging with these issues? What about our silences in the school? There's bullying. Is it fear? Is it concern about being disturbed? Is it an apathy that goes with presuming that someone else will do the right thing and I need to do nothing? So we're morally complicit by our silences. And there is that stunning silence over many of the great questions of our time. And just think about it. There are people with a strong social conscience. Sometimes it's far from adequate. As is clear from our reaction to people who are seeking asylum in this country. We blame them for their situation. Blame them for coming. Blame them for taking our jobs. What about the sanctions that we have imposed in the past against Iraq, which led to the deaths of thousands of children and other people? What about the sanctions that we are imposing now against Iran, which will never affect those in leadership, but the people on the ground, men, women and children? People who've done nothing to us, never likely to do anything to us. The silences about the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq, the silences when it comes to Indigenous issues, the silence when it comes to housing problems and homelessness in our community. Are we visibly and seriously engaged in debates over those issues and many other issues? Catherine of Siena, 14th century saint, said, "Speak the truth in a million voices. It's the silence that kills." Remember in the AIDS pandemic some years ago in the 1990s, there was a slogan, "The silence means death." And her words are haunting words as we notice how much silence there is and how it continues to grow. So why does that silence move like a fog across our planet? Why is it growing even as we learn more and more issues that should concern us? Why do we fail to raise our voices on behalf of things that trouble us? And then sometimes regret we didn't do anything about it. Why do we also resent or ridicule or dismiss the few who might raise their voices? Is it because we don't know how to talk to each other anymore? Is it because we're overwhelmed by the amount of suffering in the world? Is it because we might feel more and more powerless now than at any other time in our history? Is it that we're afraid of what we might lose if we speak out? It's one of the dangers of institutions that are dependent on government money. Is it that we've convinced ourselves that what's happening somewhere else doesn't really affect us? We go back to that story of the mousetrap. Reverend Martin Niemöller, a Lutheran pastor in the Second World War, said these words: "First they came for the communists and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist." You could say nowadays, well, I came for the trade unions, but I wasn't a trade union, so nothing. Then they came for the Jews and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. They came for the gays and the lesbians, but I wasn't a gay person, so I didn't speak up. They came for the Catholics. I didn't speak up because I was a Protestant. They came for the Muslims. I'm going to speak up because I'm a Catholic. And then they came for me. By that time, there was no one left to speak for me. So let's ask ourselves, do I consciously notice when I am silent or when I choose to be silent? And to remind ourselves that silence is not the absence of action, but another form of action, positively to be known. I've run out of time. If anyone, I haven't left too much time for discussion or questions. Anyone only, as I said, I'm sorry, I haven't, there's a few more pages, but to go, but you can have the text if you want to look it up. And I have jumped over things, so I've gone through it anyway. Ken.
Claude, it has been said that education will reduce world poverty. Would you agree with that?
I do.
Now, why is that? Why does education reduce the population?
It doesn't, well, it has an effect on reducing the population, but it doesn't, you know, it's not talking about, you're not talking about sex education, no. You're talking about, you know,
I mean,
formal education.
yeah.
Look, I don't have all the details, but the thing is, it's just as the more and more people who are educated find better forms of employment, better, you know, and those sorts of things. They don't, because, you know, amongst the poor, oftentimes, having children is a necessity in order to survive as families. Because an education can also have an effect on people's well-being and wealth and economic sustainability. You know? So, but the thing, in many countries, to have more children is necessary in order to have people to look after you, to have you know, to raise money, get money for the family, and all that sort of to survive.
Well, it just seems to me that the motivation is entirely selfish rather than God-given, rather than Christianity. I mean, I'm being a real devil's advocate.
No, that's okay.
But however,
What's selfish about educating people so that they can take a role in society and in the world?
Sorry, I'm
No,
waiting.
it's important.
It just seems to me that it should have been driven by Christianity rather than just need.
But in a lot of places, people are not Christian anyway. But we do it because they're human beings, not because they're Christian. I remember being criticised some years ago for being involved with East Timor, and by one of our priests. And he said, "Why are you involved with East Timor? You know, got no MSCs there." Wasn't nothing to do with it.
Okay, thank you.
But it's not about Christianity. It's about their humanity and their right to live a full human life. Sure. And education is one part of that. Again, not everything. It's one part of an important. Someone else might be able to answer that question better than I. Okay. Look, any other questions or clarifications or temptations? Thank you.
Just one point there. You spoke, Anne Jordan spoke about the homelessness of the body.
Yep.
And I thought there was another point you raised there that Anne spoke about.
Oh, people the mission's about people being there for people with the least options. Is that what?
That's right.
Yes.
That's it.
With the least options.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's basically it. Thank you, everyone. I'm never finished.
Claude, on behalf of everybody here, I would like to thank you very, very much for a most wonderful, most thought-provoking, most gut-wrenching presentation. I think you've taken us on an extraordinary journey plumbed the depths of a topic, and you've presented us something that on one level appears so simple, and yet the wealth of ideas and the wealth of reading suggestions and possibilities for action that is embedded in what you have given us is amazing. And I think, well, I speak for me, I don't know if I speak for you, but I have a conscience discomfort when I sit in Claude's presence. And I took heart today in that quote from the Guatemalan mission, that it's the voice of God calling me on. Perhaps it's the voice of God calling you on too. So Claude, your gentle rage and your passion and your compassion offer us a window into the heart of Jesus and an invitation to go there too. So thank you very, very much. And I have a small gift for you on behalf of everyone. And I also have a copy of Claude's presentation. If you'd like to take one, feel free, and you can have a look at the rest of what we were unfortunately unable
If
to.
the print is too small, contact me. I can send you by email a copy of it. You can download it.
So thank you for that.
Thank you everyone for your presence today. That brings day one to a close. We commence here again tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. with Brian Boyle. Reverend Dr. Brian Boyle. Scripture and the prophet Ezekiel, I think, is the text. It's on your program anyway there, you can see. For those living in, time's your own from now till 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Dinner, if you are joining the dinner 6 o'clock where we had lunch. If you're interested in, if you don't know Sydney and interested in exploring the city, just down the bottom of the hill on Anzac Avenue, the buses go regularly by, $2.30 or $40 or something will get you to the city.
Senior is $2.50.
So, yeah. And if there's anything that you're not sure about or would like to ask about, just see me. I'm not staying in tonight, I'm heading back to the mountains shortly. I'll see you all again at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Thank you all.
Could have gone on longer. I could have gone on longer. I didn't know it was finishing off at 3 o'clock.
What's that?
I could have gone on longer. Thanks, Claude.
Thank you, Claude. That's fantastic.